there are 3 types of projects that come through. One is sort of tools or guidance documents, and that's what Amelia is going to share with you today. And hers is very much an exemplar of that type of product. And another is sort of new research with small scale and innovative research that really explores and advances knowledge in the research impact space. And that is what Caitlin, Nalini, and Kat are going to share with you today, a project that exemplifies that. And a newer type of project that we included this year, which is a more targeted project. And so this year, we will be including, as one example, a targeted project that is about exploring the arts as broader impacts. So something that we felt was missing in our community, we didn't necessarily have that garden hose to drink from. Of if you wanted to go that route, how would you do that? What are the tools and resources that you need? What are the things you need to think about? That's an example of a targeted project that we're excited to be able to share with you this coming year. So I'll start by just kind of quickly introducing who we have today. This is probably an older picture of Amelia, but this is Amelia Bachelet, who is from the Institute of Learning and Brain Sciences at University of Washington. And she is going to share with you her infographic tool. And I won't talk much about it, other than I like to think of it as the tool that answers a question, so you think you want to do broader impacts? Let's start here. And it's a pretty straightforward tool that is really a good sort of boundary object for broader impacts professionals to talk to PIs and researchers about what they're thinking and what they're doing and help them organize their thoughts. So I'll let her describe more about that. And then after that, we're going to hear from Caitlin Weber, Nalini Nadkarni, and Kat Stalinsky from University of Utah and University of Maryland, respectively. And they did a scholarship tool where they investigated the ecology literature. And I'm going to let them talk a little bit more about what they saw about public engagement with science within the ecology literature. And with that, I'm going to stop my share. Any questions or comments so far? Great, wow, the numbers are growing. All right, Amelia, are you ready? Are you ready to roll?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Great.
All right, well, thank you so much, Julie, and thanks everybody for being here. Julie, I thought you did an excellent job describing my project. So, so now you know all you need to know. Now, my name is Amelia Bachelet, and I work at the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, which is a research institute at the University of Washington. I'm part of a dedicated full-time outreach and education team. So we do a lot of taking the latest science, particularly around child development and education, and working with communities. And a lot of the work that I do, that we do, really informed the idea for this project for me, which is making a topic really accessible, really bite-sized, and giving people an easy entry point into a topic. And it was really helpful for me too, because I feel relatively new to the broader impacts community. There's so much to digest, like as Julie was saying, there's this fire hose. And so I really love that, that way of describing, taking something and putting it into a digestible piece. And that was the plan for this. So I'll go ahead and just do a quick walkthrough of this tool that I created, and then we can talk more later. So let's see if I can get the screen sharing going. All right. So this tool is really designed to be a quick start framework to support either researchers who might be wanting to brainstorm a project. It can be used to help think about a broader impact statement. And it can also be used by, people in the field that are helping researchers through this, right? Broader impacts professionals, public engagement folks, to help researchers think through some different pieces that they might want to consider as they're building a public engagement plan. It's got 6 different pieces, which I'll walk you through, thinking about goals, understanding audiences and working in community. That was a real priority here, to really ground the work in community needs and to work in partnership, right? So much of science communication and, you know, outreach is just that sort of the pushing of information. And so I really want to take the time and space in this tool to sort of recenter it around community needs. Some ideas about finding inspiration, a logic model, and sharing and feedback. So those are the main sections of this tool. It is designed to be sort of an infographic in style. I don't know if you can see here on the left. So there's 2 main pages of it that are 11 by 17. So you could use a standard printer if you want to print it and put it on the wall. This PDF is also fillable, so folks can go through and actually take the time to go through and fill it out. And I designed it to have these 2 different entry points, one where you could kind of just glance at it and get this sort of quick bite of, okay, these are the kinds of things that I should be thinking about when I'm creating a public engagement plan. Or if you really want to take the time and dive a little bit deeper into the planning stages, the initial ideation phases, before you might go and use some of the excellent tools that really do take you through an in-depth process of building a plan, you can use that as well. So this first section here is thinking about your messaging. I think that is so important, thinking about really finding one key message. I think that's one of the trickiest things. It's definitely something that we face doing science communication on behalf of our researchers at iLabs, is to really take one message that you want to communicate. So there's some prompts to think about that here. Prompting folks to think about how could this project be used to increase access or engagement to the work. And then also prompting folks to think about building professional capacity, right? Really professionalizing this field and this work of public engagement. It's an important part of the research that we do. And how can you take this lens of professionalizing that work and putting it in the context of the public engagement plan that you're creating. The second section here thinks about merging these goals that you've set out for yourself with audience needs. And so thinking about who do you want to engage with, and what communities can you connect with. So there's some little dots that you can fill in, like, oh, I'd really like to work with educators if you want. Certainly not inclusive. You can, you know, add who else you might be wanting to work with, as well as some communities to think about. Are we thinking about neighborhood groups, business or professional associations, different folks and communities that we might think about working with? And then moving on, you know, to get out of this information pushing, like we might think that we have an idea of what would be a great project and might fit a need that we think we see. Reminding folks to really take a step back and think about how are you going to actually assess the needs. And so you can create a project that is supportive of what community needs. So thinking about some different prompts for just how do we connect with folks, right? How are you going to get to know an audience? You know, talk with people who work with people, spend time with people, hopefully all 3 of those different things, some things to meditate on. And then as you do this, strengthening your relationship. So centering this work in community, some prompts for thinking about building partnerships. I know at iLabs, that's so important for us. You know, we're at the university, we work with the scientists there, and we really rely on our community partners, our community-based organizations, folks that work directly with parents and children, to help us think about how are we going to create resources, and how can the knowledge that is so embedded in the communities, the parents, the educators that have this deep knowledge of children, how can that inform the work that we do? As well as some thoughts here for considering a needs assessment. There's also resources linked at the end of this tool. You know, if you've never heard of a needs assessment before, if folks have never heard of a needs assessment before, there's some really great resources that are linked to help folks think through this in a little bit more detail. Okay, moving on to page 2. There's a section for finding inspiration. And this piece here, there's some really great ideas of the different domains of public engagement. And that comes out of Michigan's public engagement framework that was developed by Elise Arbach and her colleagues there. So a little collaboration here and including this piece. And I think, you know, for creating a public engagement product, it's so important to think about like, what are your skills, right? Are you a really great speaker? Are you an artist? What are some different things that you can explore that feel like they're within your skills that you really enjoy? And also I love these 12 domains because I think we can all get a little like tunnel vision sometimes, and there's so many different ways that you can really do public engagement work. So some prompts to think about in some places, you know, for further brainstorming. There's a quick section here to help folks just think about some of the things that, you know, the nuts and bolts, right? Like what are the logistics, where, how, permissions, things like that. Some meditation on the time. This work really takes a lot of time, as we all know. So, you know, what's a realistic amount of time that you could spend on this project? And then of course, thinking about a budget, right? Personnel time, development costs, production costs, these types of things. Just a little, you know, quick reminders for folks to think about. Once you've thought about that, there's space here for folks to think a little bit further about building out a logic model and just giving space for folks to sketch this out a little bit further, right? Like what resources are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do with those resources? What are the products? How are they going to be used? And how have you created change? I think that's such an important exercise to go through. I know sometimes it's difficult to get myself to go through this when I'm creating a project. So some prompts here for some more consideration of that. And then finally here, sharing and feedback, right? Some prompts to think about, how are you going to share your work? It's important to communicate about our research. It's also important to communicate about our public engagement work. And then some prompts too about getting feedback. And, you know, with the support of some of my, you know, fellows, I got a lot of great support and feedback throughout this process. And this project evolved quite a bit over the course. And one of the things we changed here was thinking about, I had it as evaluation, and we changed it to feedback to even make that more accessible, right? Evaluation can even get within this context of, you know, very specific or jargony thing. And so feedback just opens it up a little bit and makes it a little more accessible to think about, okay, how am I going to get some responses to that? And also thank you, Julie, for, I see that you're active here in the chat, and that, yeah, Elise Orbach and Ellen Kuhn, who developed that Michigan framework, are fellows this year. So I wanted to shout that out in case folks aren't seeing that in the chat. And I'm really excited to see what amazing work that they are putting together. And then finally here is a page of resources that are available now that go along with each of these different sections. And so that's a quick overview of the product. I'd be happy to take any more questions later, but I don't want to fill any more time right now. It was a really fun process, and I also really so appreciated. I got so much support and feedback, and was able to really craft something that I really enjoyed doing and is hopefully useful to the community.
Thank you so much, Amelia. You know, one thing that strikes me about the way Amelia approached her work was like, I actually need this tool for myself, so I'm going to create it in a way that everyone else can use it too. And that's, I think, really indicative of the way that this community works, is like, I've got to figure this out. I bet other people need to figure this out too. And that's really in the spirit of the Fellows projects. One of the things that I see about Amelia's tools, it's sort of this, you know, digital worksheet version of what the more expanded broader impacts wizard, for those of you who are, I think it's actually on the front page of the ARIS website today, the wizard was popping up, that's sort of a video introduction with lots of different pathways you can follow for how you might plan your broader impacts. And this is sort of a potentially a deeper dive where, you know, one-on-one, you might work with somebody who's thinking about what will they do, how will they create their impact. And then I see a lot of the other fellows projects, the tools in particular that are coming out of this are in specific threads, like communicating about climate change is a thread, or developing community art partnerships is a thread. So there's lots of different things that this builds off of. So coming as one of the first fellows to complete her work and offer something to the community, it's a really nice kind of umbrella work under which a lot of other of the fellows projects can operate. So I wanted to say Nalini, looks like she's coming back in. Okay, great. I'm going to introduce Caitlin Weber, who's going to take it away for the next tool. And then after that, I'm hoping we'll have a little bit of time before breakout rooms. I just want to get a sense of who's here, because part of the goal of office hours is just being able to connect with each other too. So it's not necessarily meant to be a presentation, but a way to engage with each other. So we'll do a little bit of a break after Caitlin presents their work, and then we'll move into breakout rooms to dig a little deeper into how you might use these tools that they're presenting. Caitlin, go ahead, take it away.
Okay, so we have some slides, so I'm going to go ahead and share those, and then Kat's going to start us off, and I will wrap up the presentation.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. So first, our team wants to definitely thank ARIS for this funding and this opportunity. Like Amelia said, this was actually really fun to have this kind of piece to work on together. And so, you know, we really approached this a bit from a science perspective, sort of thinking about public engagement, and we're chatting about it and thought, we wondered sort of how are scientists talking to each other about public engagement in the venues where that occurs. So for example, science journals. So you can go to the next slide. So in order to do that, we thought, well, let's do a literature review. Let's look at some prominent science journals and see what scientists are saying to each other about public engagement. And we decided to focus in ecology, in part because that's an area that we all know well as ecologists, but also because it has a very strong human component. So we felt like, well, you know, if ecologists aren't talking about it, then that's really concerning. And sort of generally what we were interested in knowing is, are they publishing about public engagement in these science journals? And if so, what are they publishing about? So the next slide. So in order to capture what they're publishing, we ended up developing this classification scheme that captures kind of the type of public engagement articles. And we think this is a real valuable contribution. And we built this from our own experience, as well as doing some initial literature review. So we really sort of have 5 types of articles here. And so in sort of just briefly, the first type is kind of a reflective piece. So an individual, and I'll use the ecology example, ecologists might go into a setting and, for example, being a US Congressional Science Fellow and reflect on their experience. So it's a piece that has individual reflections and maybe recommendations. And the next category is sort of synthesis and opinion. So this is where people are sort of laying out maybe concepts or frameworks or best practices. For example, in ecology, a key concept that's been developed is translational ecology, which is sort of a really different way of approaching applied science, not just sort of like thinking about applications, but really bringing stakeholders in from the beginning. So there might be articles that get into that. Another type is when public engagement is actually embedded in the ecology research. An obvious example here is citizen science. So an article might talk about, well, how we got volunteers involved and how we assured they had the skills and what kind of data they collected, et cetera. So being another kind of way of talking about public engagement. Another way is engagement research, where ecologists are actually conducting their own social science research, looking at engagement. That could be an overview of the literature. It could be a study of that they did with a particular group. And then the last type is training and resources. So articles that sort of summarize different training programs. It might summarize a citizen science program that others could apply. So those were the 5 types that we thought would be valuable to categorize articles in the literature in, to give us the sort of first look at how scientists are talking about it. So next slide. So, so as we began the research, kind of the first thing we had to ask is, well, are ecologists really involved in public engagement? Like, do they have something to write about? And if so, then we could begin to look at journals. So we're very fortunate to get data from John Besley and a group of researchers of a survey that was conducted in 2016 with ecologists, part of the Ecological Society of America. And overwhelmingly, ecologists have been involved in some sort of public engagement. At least 80% over the past year had been involved in at least one face-to-face type of public engagement. They were involved in other types as well, but it certainly gave us evidence that, sure, they've got some fodder for these articles. So we felt well positioned to now say, okay, well, let's see what they're doing. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin, and she's going to jump into that.
Great, thanks, Kat. So once we knew that ecologists were carrying out public engagement and intended to continue to engage with the public, we first started by trying to get a broad sense of whether they're publishing on engagement. And so we searched the Web of Science from 1945 to 2018. We looked in the top 100 ecology journals, and then we also more specifically looked in a subset of those, which are 5 journals published by the Ecological Society of America. And we looked for the keywords engagement, communication, and education. We specifically chose to focus on kind of these broad terms so that we weren't biasing the results towards any particular engagement format, such as citizen science or science festivals. And so what we found was that 3% of the articles in the top 100 ecology journals and 1% in the 5 ESA journals contained one or more of these engagement keywords or search terms. Between 1945 and 1990, we saw kind of initial period with only occasional mention of these terms in the literature, and then this began to increase in the early 1990s for both the top 100 ecology journals and the 5 ESA journals. So our first search likely returned a number of articles that contained our search terms but weren't actually about public engagement. So we did another search with a smaller subset of articles that we could look at more closely by reviewing the abstracts. So we limited this search to the last 20 years, and we focused only on the ESA journals because our previous kind of broad search indicated that this provided a representative pool and also the period of the highest occurrence of articles with the PES, public engagement search terms. So this returned over 14,000 articles were published in this time frame in these 5 journals. When we looked for our specific keywords, that returned 306 articles. So after reviewing the abstracts of these articles, the 306 articles, we found that there were 113 that were classified as engagement. So this is less than 1% of the total articles that were being published in this time frame. We see that there is a kind of general increase over time in the publication of these engagement articles. And when we look at these articles in terms of the engagement categories that Kat mentioned earlier, we see that the synthesis pieces are the most frequent types of articles that are appearing. But we also see kind of in recent years, the regular appearance of engagement research articles, and which are outlined in red here, and then also the articles where engagement is really being embedded into ecological research. So like Kat mentioned, these are like the citizen science types of projects. So this suggests that, perhaps ecologists are, we're starting off by seeing a lot of these synthesis articles where ecologists are talking about calling for engagement, talking about general frameworks for engagement, and then in recent years are starting to think more about engagement as being a key part of their ecological research and studying the kinds of engagement work that they're doing and assessing and publishing on their outcomes. Although it is important to note that these numbers are still quite small. So we created a classification scheme that is available on the ARIS website, and I can put the link into the chat for that. And essentially came out with kind of 3 recommendations for engagement researchers that are hoping to do a similar study. The first is to define public engagement and select a scientific discipline to focus on. We intentionally chose a really broad definition of engagement because we knew that we weren't going to be able to assess the quality or the engagement outcomes from reviewing the article abstracts. And then, of course, setting boundaries for the review. So selecting a time frame. We did a kind of a general search of just the keywords at first to select our time frame, and then classifying the documents according to categories, which we have provided ours on the ARIS website. So in general, kind of the recommendations that we came out with as a result of our study are, first, we'd like to see this number increase, to see engagement articles being published more frequently in ecological literature to help normalize engagement and help further the practice of engagement among ecologists. We recommend also using consistent keywords when these articles get published into scientific literature so that these papers are easier to find. And then lastly, we noticed that there were some special issues being published in the ecological literature on engagement. And while these are really an important way to kind of elevate those conversations, we would also hope to see engagement kind of interspersed throughout the regularly published literature as well. Kat and Nalini, do you have anything to add? No? Great.
So thank you so much, Caitlin. One thing that I think is really exciting about the way that this team did the work is they did it in a way it can be replicated, right? So anybody in this community that has a little bit of sense of what they did could take their process and adapt it for a different discipline and try to understand the degree to which public engagement, or you could use a different set of terms that are more inclusive or maybe more oriented around communication, whatever it is, and apply it to a different discipline. So they've sort of laid the groundwork for someone else to kind of ride their coattails in understanding how these things look in different disciplines. And then it's exciting to think about having this as a baseline, right? So we can say, this was the state in 2020 or 2019, as the case may have been. And we can look in a decade later at what's changed, and we can try to understand that and connect it to, one of the things that I think it can be hard about this work is that the reward system doesn't really support scientists often publishing in the types of journals that are really interested in this work. So the idea that ecology is a discipline where there's some integration going on is kind of exciting and can hopefully pave the way for others. So Nalini, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I'll just say that thanks, Julie and Caitlin and Kat. When we started this out, we were sort of nervous and a little bit insecure about taking this on, to be honest, because in some ways what we've done is just sort of elaborate the obvious. I think that everybody knows that many scientists are doing public engagement work, and we also know that it's very rarely published in the disciplinary journals that the people of that discipline read. But we felt that this could be important because it actually documents that. It actually, as you said, sort of puts a pin on the map in terms of how few, less than 1% of these articles in, as an ecologist, the ESA journals are just so important to us. So it may not seem like a rock shaking kind of result, but I think that we feel it was valuable for us to make this contribution, and we're really grateful to ARIS for facilitating that and making that happen.
Well, thank you to all four of you for being exemplar fellows and sort of setting the stage for what's to come. We're going to break out into rooms, and so Amelia will take a group, and I think you'll be able to select your own room to talk a little bit more about using what they've put forward, how you might integrate it into your own work. This is just an exploratory kind of casual discussion, and then we'll come back together. But before we do, if folks can locate their reaction little happy face plus sign at the bottom, I'm going to get to know a little bit about who's here. So people have kind of been coming and going a little bit, but who on the call is a current or a previous fellow? If we can get a thumbs up from the reaction. Oh, Christina. Anybody wants to share their video so you can see who you are too, that's helpful, but understand if you can't. Yay. Okay. So the thumbs fade after a certain number of times. So quite a few people on this call are current or future fellows. Who on this call is a part of the ARIS team, sort of part of the staff and co-PIs of ARIS? All right. Great. Those of you who didn't fit in those categories, anybody want to throw out their own category? Just part of the ARIS community. It seems like everybody on this call is. All right. Well, the reason I wanted to do that was just so you could see who's here and who you might want to connect with. The chat, I think, makes it available for you to connect with everybody, but also just to see that there's a lot of people with a lot of experience. So if you are new to this community, there are a lot of resources, and this is just the tip of the iceberg on this call. So we're going to break out into, oh, Sarah, thank you. Sarah's one of the new fellows. She's excited for the year ahead. We're going to break out into groups, and Mary Beth, I think, has set this up, and I think it's a little bit of an experiment. And we will come back in about 12 to 15 minutes. And I think I should be able to pop into each group. So just bear with us for 1 minute here.
Do you see something?
Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, if you click on the little unassigned arrow, and then you can select a group to join. Well, I'm wondering if the fellows who were sort of leading the spotlights on their work could give a little bit of a reflection of the types of things that came up in the short time we had together. Every time I do a breakout room, I always look back thinking it should be longer. But if you had anything you wanted to sort of reflect back as important things to consider as we all move forward in this space together.
I'm happy to jump in. So, you know, thank you to everybody that joined the breakout session. As I said there, I felt like, you know, it's an opportunity for me to learn more things. So there was a lot of conversation around how the tool might be used to help faculty and support faculty. And one of the recommendations was to think about creating an accompanying slide deck that might go with it. It sounds like that would be useful to folks that might be presenting this to faculty, as well as, and that was Mary Green's idea, as well as giving faculty a place where they could sort of type in to a slide deck. So that's something that is a really lovely idea and something I'm going to think about. But you know, lots of conversation around how can this be used? Has it been used to be introduced to faculty before, which I haven't done that work. And so any folks who are using it, I'd love any sort of feedback or recommendations, you know, small tweaks that can be made. But that was sort of the core of our conversation was how do you actually like use the tool in a real world setting, and what additions would be useful to help folks walk through this planning process.
Great, thanks, Amelia. Anybody from the other team?
Yeah, I'll just chime in here with, or start, and then Caitlin and Kat can chime in. I think there were three things that interested me. One was the interest in the tool. I think that, you know, there might be a chance that people would find this useful, especially at this point in time of the development of BI. Secondly, I think we talked about sort of segregation versus and specialization of journals. That is, do we want to think about pushing this reporting of scientific work and public engagement into BI type journals, or do we make this effort to push them towards the disciplinary journals? And I think that's a really good thing to continue thinking about. Some of that might be an uphill battle because of this continuing desire to publish in our disciplinary journals. And then the third part was really optimistic. The fact that I think many of us are noting that our emerging scientists, our young graduate students and young faculty are really seeing public engagement as a part of the scientific process now, much more than we used to, that it's not a burden, that it is a benefit, and that publishing about this, I think the consensus was that this will continue to get easier and easier to do as we move into the future. So both of the tools we talked about today, I think Amelia's as well as ours are tools that can be helpful in in making that optimistic move forward in terms of publishing public engagement for the scientific community.
Thank you. So we don't have anything else. If anyone has any final comments, they want to speak up, now would be a great time. Okay. Well, I'm going to hang out for a few minutes, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining our office hours and taking the time to connect with each other and step away from this very exciting news day. We really appreciate seeing your faces and keeping connected, even though we don't get to see each other out in the world all that often these days. So thank you so much. And thank you so much, Amelia, Nalini, Kat, and Caitlin, for your contributions to the community and for spotlighting your work today.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Julie.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome. My pleasure.
All so much. This is a great discussion.
Thank you.